Here we go.
Okay, sure. So thanks, Vinay. Thank you for having me. So thank you guys for joining and taking time out from your busy schedules. So today we are pretty much going to discuss about what Lightning events are in Lightning Web Components. So before we start, a bit about me. My name is Amit Singh. I'm Salesforce MVP. I'm also certified application architect, founder of SFDC Panthers, community group leader, and community speaker. At the rate Claudiamit is my Twitter handle. You can follow me there. And if you have any kind of doubts related to Salesforce, you can reach me out. Here is agenda for us that we are going to cover in next 30-40 minutes. We will see, we will talk about what are the events in Lightning Web Component and what is the need of events. And then we will talk about how we can communicate between parent to child and child to parent. And then at the end, we can have some Q&A sessions so that if anyone have any doubts, we can work on those. So first thing is that events are basically used, or we can say, to provide a way of communication between two or more related components. So if events components are not related with each others, then in that case we have some other ways of communication that we can use. And event will only work whenever we are trying to communicate from it is child to parent, not parent to child, because for parent to child we have API functions and API variables. So this is a very simple syntax where we can create our own event with the help of custom events, because the Lightning Web Component follows web standards. So we can use the function that is provided by JavaScript library, which is custom event, and then we can pass the details if we want to, and if we don't want to, we can skip that part as well. And then we have dispatch event, that is also a method which will be used for executing the event from the source component. Source component will always be the child component in case of events. So let's quickly start with the parent-child communication. Suppose that we have two related components. One is parent and one is child component. In that case, we want to pass some data from parent component into the child component. How we can do that? So there are two options. One is API decorator. That means we can create some variable inside our child component, which will be decorated as API. And then there is another API function. It will also be inside child component, where we will be creating a JavaScript function which will be decorated as API. So let's quickly see. So this is my VS Code, and I'm sure everyone know how to create a project and how to authorize your Salesforce environment with the VS Code. I will quickly jump from creating two components, and then we will walk through the demo. So I'm creating two components. I will say one is parent and one is child component. So let's quickly create two components here. So for creating the components, it's our best practice. Always start from the lower camel case. Don't use upper camel case. Even if you will use, Salesforce will rename it to the lower camel case. So as a best practice, always use lower camel case. So here we are inside child component. So what we will do is we will first create an API variable, and then we will see how we can pass the information from our parent component to the child component. So it is as simple as to create a variable. We just need to type at the rate API. So once we will select API from the list, we will also see that we are importing the API from LWC library. If we are not importing, then we need to type manually, because that is mandatory. If we are not importing, then then we will not be able to deploy the code into the environment. So I will say getting message. This is a blank message. I'm not passing any value. I'm not using any value inside child component. And let's quickly use this component inside our HTML file. So I will say, I'm sure everyone is familiar how to use variables inside Lightning components, how we can display the value. So it is as simple as you just need to use curly braces and provide your variable name, whatever you have created inside your JavaScript class. Now let's open our parent component. So we have this parent component JavaScript file. We are not creating anything as of now, but inside our parent component, what we will do is we will have that child component incorporated here. So to use that, we just need to use namespace, which is C by default, and then name of our component. So it is child component, and we are good here. As of now, what you can see is we are using child component, and the name has been replaced, like we created child component in a lower camel case, and it is replacing like child hyphen component. So what, as it follows web standards, what it is doing is it is saying that it is breaking every single word with a hyphen if you have any capitalization in your name of the component. So for example, if you have child component, everything in small, your component will look like this. And as we have C as a capital of component, that's why we are getting hyphen between child and component. Next thing is that we need to pass the value in our API that we created variable, that is greet message. Same rule will be followed for a variable as well. It will break down the variable from the capitalization in your variable name. So let's quickly say here, I'm going to send that message from parent component. So this is as simple as, now what we need to do is, as we are using child component inside parent component, so first we need to deploy child component. I will deploy this source to the Salesforce environment, and then after, once it's done, we will deploy the same into the we will deploy parent component to our Salesforce environment as well. And we will be using a lightning application, that will be aura application, to preview this component whatever we have created. So to preview the component, what we need to do is we need to use C, which is the namespace colon, and then we need to provide name of component, that is parent comp. So here in Aura application, it will always be the traditional way that we are doing from since long time. So here there is no use of using like C hyphen or then the name of the component. So now you can see that we have successfully deployed our application. I'll quickly open my Google Chrome browser where I opened my Salesforce environment. I'll just refresh this developer console so that we can get the updated code here. And before we go ahead, I'll just quickly show you where we can find our Lightning Web components that we just created. So you need to go to the setup, and from the setup, just find components there. And under Lightning components, you will see the link Lightning components. Once you will click here, you will see that you have created this parent component, and we created one more that is child component. So this is how, and here like this is the place where you can see the list of all your Lightning Web components, but you cannot modify, delete, or you cannot do anything from here. If you want, then again you have to set up VS Code and do the uh, processing where you wanted to delete or rename the components. Just to preview the application, I'm going to open. So my application name was demo. So here you will see that we are getting whatever the code we have inside our application. Let's click on preview. And why we are using Aura application, because in for web application we don't have any concept as of now to preview the application inside our Salesforce environment. But yes, we do have local development, that is a separate concept which we will not cover here. So you can see here we are getting messages from parent component. Even if we, what we will quickly do is we will create a button here inside our parent component, and on that button click we will call a method of our parent component. So even for calling a JavaScript method or using a button here, okay, we are inside our application where we don't want to make any changes. We will put that button inside our parent component. So we are discussing even for calling a method or using a variable, everything is same. Just need to use curly braces and provide either your method name or the name of your variables here. So as we created this method, we have to create that method inside our JavaScript. So what? Oh, this is child one. So let's quickly JavaScript file of open the JavaScript file for our parent component. So what I will do is I will quickly create a method here, and before, like as of now here we are binding a static value. Now what we will do is we will bind a dynamic value and the value that we will be getting from the JavaScript side. So let's quickly create a variable here which is message, and put the value whatever we are trying to pass by default. Make sure that we are using the correct name, and then in the button click what we will do is we will change the value of this variable. So what we will say here, this, because this we are using so that we can define, we are trying to refer the variable for this particular component, and then change the value here. So we can put a simple text that is value changed, and let's deploy this, and then we will see what will happen. So in this case what will happen, by default we will see this message because we are passing the value, we are binding this variable into the variable that we created into our child component. And then what we are doing is on the click of button we are changing the value for the same variable which is bind to the variable of our child component. So now let's quickly refresh this page. Now we have got this button. If we click here you can see that the value is dynamically being changed, and even this, the value that we are displaying here, whatever the message we are displaying, that is being displayed into our child component. That means we are successfully able to pass the variable. Now you are saying there might be some questions around it, like why we are trying to send a variable every time I will change the value into the parent variable, it will automatically reflect into the child variable. What if I wanted to send based on some event on the parent component, even on this particular button click, then I wanted to send. So for that what we have is we have API functions that we can use. So we have to define an API function here. So let's quickly say here click me, and I will say this is the name of child. So what we did here, we are just quickly defining a variable, and under this variable I'm just quickly changing again the value of our message, that we value of our attribute. So we can say here child method clicked. So what we will do is we will call this method from our child component JavaScript class. So to call this method, what we need to do is, as of now we are changing the variable. Let's quickly comment this out. First thing that we need to do is we need to get the instance of our child component which we are using inside our parent component. So let's quickly copy this piece of code, and to get that, let's create a variable here. I will name it as child component. And to get the instance what we need is this, that is default, and then we have template, uh, that is query selector, this dot template, then we have query selector, that's it. Here we are saying that inside this template we wanted to get this particular element, what our child component name is, including the namespace. Now we have got everything inside this, like what we will get inside this variable is we will get this whole component, we will get even this greeting message as well, whatever, even we have some other parameters that we are passing from the child component, sorry, from the parent component to the child component. We will be getting everything inside this particular variable. Now what we can do is, what we need to do is we just need to use like apex class. We have the object of our class, we wanted to call the method name, and the method name is whatever we defined inside our child component. This is it. Now if we compare the same with the epis class, let's quickly do that as well. The first line what we are doing is this is something like, suppose that we have a class account controller, and inside that class we have some method like get accounts. So what we are doing, this first line is actually doing that it is creating an object of our class, and then we are calling the method of our class, that is account controller dot get accounts. So this is the equivalent to the epis class. If you try to compare, these are the two lines similar to these two lines what we are trying to call like our epis class. So now once we will deploy our child component, so even let's quickly get back to parent component markup file. We're going to remove this. So for the first time we will see here, let's quickly say here message from child component, so that we can quickly see the difference. Now let's quickly deploy this first child and then we will deploy the parent. So now we have deployed it. Let's quickly refresh the page to see the updated output here. You can see as of now we are getting message from child component. As soon as we will click this button, we will see different messages here. So if you see here, we are able to see child method clicked. Now this is how you can trigger the child component method based on your event. And that will be on your hand when you wanted to trigger that method. Now again, if you wanted to pass some parameters inside the method, you can do that in a similar way that we used to do in our FS class. You wanted to pass some variable. You can see here message, or you can even try to, let's say that we are using some variable 1 and variable 2. So these are the three parameters that we are that we are passing from our parent component. You can see here even now you can use this like whatever the message you are passing from our parent component. So what we need to do is again pass the variables here. Let's say that value changed. Here you wanted to pass some other variable like 1 or 2. You can pass these values and this will work. So even we will see how it works. Before we go ahead, let's quickly get back to our slide. So this was all about how we can communicate parent with a child. Now suppose that we wanted to communicate in either way. That means we wanted to communicate child to parent. How we can do that? So for that we do have events where child component will be executing the event and parent component will be handling the event. That means child component is a source component and parent component is a target component. Again, we already saw this line where we are creating a custom event with the help of a method available inside JavaScript library, that is custom event. And then this is the detail is the value that we wanted to pass from our uh, child to parent. Now these are the three web standards that we need to follow while we are creating our uh, custom event. That is we no need to use uppercase letters. There should not be any space into the name of our event and no underscores into the name of the event. So to handle the event inside parent component, what we need to do is we just need to use the word on before the name of the event. Like we have standard browser events on click, on select, on double click, on hover. Like that we need to use, suppose that our custom event is selected, then to handle we need to use on selected. So even what is the use of like this, this is a very simple image here that I found where LWC recipes from Salesforce itself. So if you see here event with data, this is a parent component which itself contains contact list item, that is a child component responsible for displaying the contact details. And then on the right hand side we are displaying the contact details, which is the parent component itself. So what is happening behind the scene, whenever any user is clicking on the name of the user, this component is being changed. however we will not see this, but we will see similar kind of activities how this works. So again we will be walking through, like we will be playing with these two components itself. Now what we will do is we will add one more button inside child component this time. So let's quickly comment this out. Even let it be here so that we can see how the variable, like we are able to get the variables or not. Again we will say here, we can say here register event. This is just for executing the event from the child component. So first step was to create the event. So I'll say here LWC event. So this is how you can create an event. You need to use new, which is even used to initiate a new memory into the heap size. We have got custom event, that is a predefined method, the name of your event. So let's say here even I'm going to say selected, and this is the important part of your event, which is detail. Here you can pass some values, you can pass some objects as well, but as a best practice, always try to pass primitive data types like string, IDs, integer, boolean, double. Don't try to pass objects here. And the reason behind that not to passing object is that these objects are immutable. That means we cannot change the value, or we cannot iterate through them and then change the value of those objects. That's why we can only pass uh, primitive data types here. So suppose that we are trying to pass here message itself. So what we will say here, it is a JSON object if you have noticed. So JSON object always contains key and value pair. So let's say that we are trying to pass messages here. So what we can see here is, so now what we are saying, we are passing a message from an event from the child component using event. Instead of with, we are going to replace using event. So this is a very simple event that we just executed from our child component. Now to trigger this method, we have to create a button inside our child component markup language. So we will quickly get back here. I'll quickly put a line break here, and we have got this button. Let's quickly change the method name here. Even if you don't want to copy your method name, what you can quickly do is hit control space, and you will see all the methods, like whatever you do have. We have got register event. This is our method, and we can quickly save it. So let's quickly change the label as well. We will say here register event. So now the work for our child component side is done. We can quickly deploy this source into the Salesforce. Now what we need to do is we need to do one thing inside our parent component is, let's quickly copy the name of our event that we created. We are here inside our parent component. As of now, we are just using parent component. We are not even passing any variables here. We are not handling any event which is being executed from our child component. So as we say here, to handle the event, unlike our standard events, if you type here on, and then you will see that you have got multiple events. So what we need to do is we need to use word on and then just paste the name of your method. So it will be on selected. Suppose that you have a method, you are saying on remove, you can here say here on remove. And then again we need to pass the method of our parent component. So let's quickly create one method here inside parent component JavaScript class. So I will say here and handle event, and this will be having or this will be receiving one parameter which is type of event, so that we can get what value we are trying to pass inside the detail parameter. So now we are here inside our parent component. Before we do here, let's quickly provide the name of our method. Now what we need to do is let get the message here. Let's quickly say here message from child. How we will get here, we have got event dot the name of our JSON object, that is detail in our case. So let's quickly say here detail, and then dot, we have got the name of our variable which we wanted to access. This is in this variable now we will get whatever we are passing from our child component. Now let's quickly try to console this, or we can say here we will create one more parameter here. This will be having a blank value initially, and then we will assign this value. So what we are doing is whatever value we are getting from the child component, we are assigning into a new variable that is child message, and we will display this variable inside our parent component so that we can see here. So this is it. Let's quickly deploy this source code into the environment, and we will see how it works. So as of now, you can see that we have got two buttons. This button is on child component, and then this is on parent component. So first we will test parent to child, which we were passing some variables. So let's quickly click here, and you can see the value changed. This value we are passing from our parent component to the child component using API function. Again, let's quickly get back to JavaScript here, and you can see here we are passing, sorry, we are passing the value, and that is value change, and there are two more variables we are passing, but we are not doing anything with those variables inside our child component. Now if you click on this register event, we should be able to see some other message here on the parent component. So let's quickly click here, and here you can see that we are able to see whatever the message we sent from our child component, that is coming inside the parent component. So based on this is how we can quickly pass. Even if you want to pass multiple values, you have the option here providing some comma here. Let's say that you are saying that value, you can provide some random values here. And then again, accessing the component is like accessing the value is the same thing, that you have to use same pattern. You have to follow like event dot target, and then sorry, event dot detail, and then whatever the name of parameters that you wanted to access. If you try to compare this with the apps class, this will be like this. Suppose that you have some apps class here. So say that you have an apps class, and then again you have some wrapper class inside that class, and here you have some variables like public string name. So to access this, what you will do is the name of your object, sorry, the name of your class, again the name of your wrapper class, and then the name of your parameter. That is what we are doing here, is to access the event variables here. The name of our, whatever the variable we are passing here, that is event. Then the name of our detail parameter, which will even be always same, and then the message, the name of our parameters that we are passing. So even we do have few more component or two more values that we can pass inside our event. Is I'll quickly give you the brief overview about that. Here is we have that is bubbles. You can pass value as a true. By default it will always be a false value here. And then we have one more, that is composed. So what it does, I will just quickly briefly walk you through. So bubbles, as the name indicates, it will be bubbling up the event from the shadow from the DOM of document object model of your component. How it will be like, how it will look like here. So suppose that here we are inside our parent component. As of now, we are not using inside any, like we are not using any component above this child component. Suppose that we are using division tag, and then inside that we are using this component. So as of now, this component can only be handled at this DOM label, because every component will have its own document object model. What if you wanted to handle our event outside this DOM? Suppose that I wanted to handle my event outside the DOM here. So for this, what I need to do inside of my event is I have to make the variables value true for the bubbles. it will even bubble up from the one DOM to the another DOM which is just immediate above. Even if it is having some other division above that, we will not be able to get that event there. And then what the composed variable do here is, if you make this variable as true, it will we can say that it will like it will go above the shadow DOM. How the shadow DOM will work here, what is shadow DOM is, every component have its own shadow DOM. Now there are two different things. Every element will have its own DOM, and every component will have its own shadow DOM. So suppose that we having this particular component, that means this component have its own shadow DOM, and then we are having this parent component, it will be having its own shadow DOM. So to quick give you more clarity here, I can open this. This is a here. So what will happen here? So there will be a shadow DOM of this component, which will be starting from here, and there is a to do item here. And inside, if we open this to do item component, let's quickly copy this and paste inside the same. And there will be one shadow DOM for this as well. So this is how your shadow DOM will be created if you have two or more components. But now if you talk about DOM, that means this paragraph will having its own DOM. Then this division will also be having this its own DOM. So what bubble does is, you can pass the DOM boundary from one element to another element. But what compose do is, you can cross the shadow DOM boundary from one component to another component. So even as a best practice, Salesforce always suggest not to use these but two parameters. If you want to pass the values to the parent component, handle the event inside this component like we are handling here, then again create another event here, execute that, and then the grandparent inside which we are using this component will be handling that event which is being executed from this particular parent component. So with this, we will wrap up our session, and we will open the one window for the Q&A session.